Welcome, dear readers, to Cover My Ass, where baffling books are reviewed but not read by yours truly. My name is Kaki.
And I'm Kay, and remember, we only judge a book by its cover.
And we find ourselves once more amid the towering stacks of your library where I've sort of returned things to order. I've placed all the bookshelves back where they're supposed to be, and I've shooed off the heb dromedary.
Yeah, they've just scuttled off to underneath the skirting boards.
Is that something they can do? I mean, they are headless, legless,
they flatten themselves out and get in through the cracks.
I'm so happy that I didn't have to see that. They are very upsetting animals.
Yeah, why did you even bother with them? I mean, I guess you wanted to ride them?
Yeah, I had a bit of a librarian's crisis, I guess one would say. Like, I've realised that I wasn't a very good librarian and that I spent so much time with all of the wonderful mystical animals in your magical library, where I've been a guest for a year and a bit.
A year and 17 weeks at this point, I think.
Oh, wow, good math.
69.
No, I'm just really...
Minus 52.
Yes, this is episode 69. Is that going to start happening now?
I guess it is. Okay. I'm pretty sure it is. It's going to be a very nice episode.
So I'm going to try and, find my place, in the words of Elton John.
Okay, so I guess that was an announcement of the emergency library broadcast system. The raccoons are at it again.
Oh, now I'm imagining them in their little control room with the flashing lights and the clipboard, and they're running about.
Yeah, one of them standing on the shoulders of the other, leaning over the microphone, pressing the button, making the announcement.
Going beep, beep, beep.
I don't think you have to do the beeping yourself. I think you can push a button for that.
That's what they say about lightsabers when you're in a Star Wars film,
right.
But I don't believe them. I think you have to make the noise yourself, otherwise that doesn't happen.
I'm pretty sure Ian McGregor got told off for doing exactly that.
And you said, fuck off, I'm the Queen. Who's the Jedi? You or me?
No, we can see your lips moving. You're still doing it.
You can CGI that. Yeah. I know you can.
I mean, yes, they would.
And Laura Dern on The Last Jedi, when she finally gets a gun and she just couldn't resist going pew, 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 pew.
Did they still do the blue circly flashy thing that they did in the original The New Hope? Well, it wasn't even called The New Hope back then. It was just called Star Wars.
Wasn't it even the Star Wars for a week?
It doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
It's just the one war, though, really. Really, when you really think about it.
Well, you have the Clone Wars, and then you have the, the Rebellion, the Extinction. No,
which ones are the Clone Wars?
I imagined the Clone Wars being this thing where, you are fighting the cloners. You're fighting against the evil horde of people who are making the clones.
Own clone, brother against brother.
That could have worked, as well. And
they're
just you just get a surprise bunch of soldiers, which were just cloned for you guys. But even George Lucas was fighting an unwinnable battle in making those prequels.
Oh, yeah.
It's there's no way that he could please enough people because whatever they imagined was so much cooler than anything he could put on screen anyway. So
or anyone.
No, totally. Absolutely. That's why Star Wars it spoke to the imagination.
Yes.
And everybody, you could make up all these old stories of these little details and things, and that's why they made the toys. Every character you saw in the film had its own figure, even if with just a background appearance, and then
they're going to name the fucking holographic chess pieces have their own comic, right? That's the kind of universe they live in.
And then I think we're doing a book review today.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, we're talking about Star Wars.
I'm still in my librarian crisis where I'm just having a weird relationship.
Yeah.
With
So
books.
how's that going? It's resolved, uncrisised. Faith refound.
No, I'm going to find my place. It's probably going to take at least a few episodes.
You can go the distance
like this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Maybe I need to get back to basics for a bit. Maybe I need to put down my little pith helmet and
file some books. Well, you've done a good job in getting things back in order.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I put them all in their place. I'm starting to understand the Dewey Imperial system and how the numbers sort of change depending on which way the shelf is facing.
Well, yes, of course. It also depends on third and fourth dimensional orientation, but that's for later.
The third dimension I can sort of handle. The fourth dimension is tricky. Yeah. It's tricky.
It might be time for the red ink.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's a deep pull. I wonder if our humble little podcast has a wiki by now that people are tracking this deep lore. But in the meantime, how about we just discuss today's book?
Today's book's by Christopher Rowley. I think we decided we were going to pronounce it like that.
I think so, yeah.
A Sword for a Dragon.
Yes.
And we have, we have a dragon on the front cover and a sword, for that matter.
I am famous for loving a book that does what it says on the tin. It's a sword for a dragon, and he's got a big old dragon, and he's dressed like a knight. He's got a helmet,
and he's got a shield with a dragon on it. I think it's a wyvern, but
what's the difference?
It's just a different type of dragon.
What's the difference?
So you've got Oriental dragons and Occidental dragons and accidental dragons. Although those are very you have to be aware of those.
Okay. That was a made up little jokey joke. I know that.
I think wyverns are completely limbless, or they're the ones with like
Okay, so
animal
they're
legs.
the serpent.
Bird, or they might have the bird feet or something like that.
Oh.
There's like whole classifications for different kinds of dragons, and wyvern is just one particular kind.
Aren't those classifications?
They're all made
sort
up.
Of made, yeah. Okay. No,
They're all
I
made
got
up.
that.
I mean,
but like,
of course, they're made up.
no, I know that, but there's a difference between mythology and mythology is just famously inconsistent.
Well,
in its
it depends on
representation.
it depends on who's making it up at the time.
Yes, and it spans multiple centuries. But so what we have here on the cover is like his armor, this green scaled. I want to say probably about 20, 30 feet tall.
Ooh,
no, 20.
About 12, 13. It's like the human. There's a human.
He's twice man height. Okay,
yeah, so that would put him at about 12, 13, 14 feet high.
Being
this, 6
this
at
is
tops.
sort of medieval.
Yeah.
But like we Dutch are tall, so
yeah,
our idea of what's average is...
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. But if we've got the horns on top, so we've got a little bit of
so
leeway
probably a
there.
4.5 foot tall dragon.
What?
And
4.5? No, 4.5 foot tall human.
Look, I'm following your lead here.
I said 12 feet dragon.
Yeah.
Like that sword is a good 5 feet long, but...
Okay, but how do you measure?
Well,
because it's a super curved sword. Do you measure along the bottom or along the top? Do you
but you have it pointing out straight, and then you measure from the base to the tip in a straight line. That's how you measure.
And you don't use a tape measure because
Exactly.
that's cheating. So this armor is incredibly well fitted.
Yes.
To
What can I
the
say?
exact anatomy
I mean,
of
it's
his
got
horns.
like
It's got horn sheath.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. That's going to be a pain to put on. I just noticed that the forward visibility in that helmet is non-existent.
Yes. Also, considering the fact that he has eyes on the side of his head,
but even then,
maybe
it's like
he has
horse vision.
Maybe a good moment to inform the readers at home. You can actually see the cover of today's book if you look down at your podcasting device. You should be seeing the cover of today's book. Otherwise, you can check us out on Twitter. Cover My Ass Cast. Shit, I did it right this time, and I just doubted myself too much. So there was
and
the
then you
pause. So Cover My Ass Cast on Twitter, where we always post the latest episode. And if you're listening to this later, you can also go to covermyasscast.com and look for episode 69, where you see the cover of today's. Okay, for real? Is it every time?
Probably.
Okay, cool. And you'll see the cover of Christopher Rowley's A Sword for a Dragon. Like, his tail has
armor plating on the top.
With leather straps.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's not going to stay in place, is it?
That's great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like well designed. Although I did love an artist who draws a lot of otters, anthropomorphic otters, and they have given them tail bags. And it's
tail bags?
Yeah, so it's basically like a belt, and then like two like little saddle bags which hang off the side of the tail, and it's so adorably cute.
Oh,
it's fantastic. It's like tail bags.
That's a wonderful way to carry stuff around.
It is. It's like this tail is like thick. If you look at it, you're wondering how does that exactly extend underneath from behind the thighs. I mean, the tail's thicker than his thigh.
I don't think that's very unusual for reptiles. Like, we think about tails on mammals and that it's an extension of a spine, right? And it's a meaty, like, sheath around the extended spine.
Right, and in mammals, it's like the legs are more like a sideways extension from the body, which smoothly continues into the tail. Yeah, I see how that makes sense, yeah.
Because they also have... Like, their spines aren't like ours, reptiles.
Oh,
do you know? Well, do you know why those skittery lizards, why they run and then they stop, and then they run and then they stop? Because their spines only move sideways.
Oh.
So when they run, they're bellowsing their lungs, so they can't run and breathe at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Put one leg forward, that means collapsing one lung.
Right.
Other leg forward, you bellows it back and forth, but you want to get a good breath in.
Ah, I see. That makes sense.
You have to stop.
Yes. And there's also a bit of a foppishly dressed human in front of him.
I know.
Although I do notice that they're kind of like matching colors. I mean, the dragon has purple legs, and the human is wearing purple pants and a green tunic, I suppose, and purple. What are they? Shoulder paillettes?
Epaulettes,
it's just part. I think it's just part of the tunic.
Yeah, you're right.
And like a purple beret with a feather and some like a rapier-esque saber. No, it's a saber, not a rapier.
How can you tell?
It's a cutting blade.
And what's the other one he's holding? He's holding a little...
I think that would be called a dagger. Daggers are bigger than you'd think. I mean, dagger is not like a little thingy stabby knife. Daggers traditionally are big things.
That's right. Like Sting in Lord of the Rings is described as a dagger. Yeah,
but for a hobbit, it's a sword. Yeah, because it's like hobbits are only wee.
Even smaller than medieval humans, so around the 0.9 to 0.95 feet.
I can't remember how tall hobbits are canonically supposed to be. They're like...
I'm sure Weta Digital can tell you, because they have
of course they can.
charts for the Lord of the Rings films.
Interesting thing about that is they only had to build 2 different height sets because what's the name of the guy who plays Gimli?
Jonathan Rhys-Davies.
Yes, and he's super tall. He's like 6 foot something.
He's a big fella.
And all the guys playing the hobbits are relatively short guys.
Yep.
So it just happened to be that their size difference is right for the size difference between a hobbit and a dwarf.
Yeah.
So the dwarf was on the same set size as the hobbits.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was like taller than them. And it kind of worked out scale-wise towards the humans.
And for the humans and elves. And
So they're like in a city, medievalish looking background. There's some tarpaulins over the top. Banners flying in the back.
Sandstone. It's very sunburnt, I would say.
There's clearly a low-standing sun, judging by the shadows.
Do you see that they're standing on the rim of something?
Yes, I think it's a pit or maybe an arena or a amphitheater.
You wouldn't be able to tell unless we see the other side from the image.
Well, we'll have to get to that part of the book then.
Yes, because let's get started with the book. So we have a sword for a dragon, which is not traditionally how sword and dragon stories go.
No, which I thought was a very nice new take on the concept. So this story takes place in the mountain kingdoms where the dragons live. Here be lots of dragons.
Yeah.
And the dragon on the front, it's the young dragon Accolade.
See, I thought it was Accolade.
Accolade. You think dragons are inherently French?
Well, it could be Accolade, Accolade.
No,
a chocolade.
A chocolade, yeah.
No, accolade. No,
accolade.
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 I kind of like that.
Yeah. Who's moping around.
Yeah, he's a bit of a glum dragon, isn't he?
He has good cause to be. Because in the Dragon Kingdoms, which are experiencing a time of turmoil, he's one of the sons of Queen Bethesda. They have this conflict with their neighbouring kingdom.
Oh, yes, the Kingdom of Winchester.
The Kingdom of Winchester. And all dragons of a certain age are expected to join the forces, like fight the
warrior
good
culture,
fight.
isn't it?
Very much so.
Like the Klingons or the Luxons of Farscape.
Yes. However, as tradition demands, a dragon must have a sword.
Yes.
And a sword must be won in conquest.
Yeah, it must be earned.
And traditionally, that happens by human knights. Human knights in shining armour coming to fight the dragons, which are then slayed by the dragons and their swords are taken from them. And they have got a whole brilliant setup for this. They have the Tower of Terror, which is a bit of a ritual castle, which is set up at the border between the dragon and the human kingdom, where young human knights who come to prove themselves wander up in their shining armour with their big swords, and then they face the young dragons who are then temporarily housed in this tower. It's kind of a ritual, a tradition, where a young dragon is exiled to the Tower of Terror, where they have to live. They've been accosted by a knight. And
it's the coming of age, isn't it?
It is, very much so. And unfortunately, young Accolade has been sitting in this tower for a number of years now, and no human has shown up. Well, there was the one Sir Rogate who showed up at the gates at one point, but that turned out to be just a prank played on him by Accolade's older brother, Bandai, who had just got some flunky to go with a wooden sword and showed up.
Cruel.
And it's like, it was.
Because Accolade had the misfortune of coming of age in a time when not only were the Dragon Kingdoms in turmoil, but the neighbouring human kingdoms, in particular Winchester, was on one of its campaigns of militant pacifism. The merciless, brutal oppression of any violence through violence.
Yeah, an enlightened period of peace had broken out there.
Well,
and the humans decided they didn't want to play anymore. Why should we send out our young and brightest, armed with our best weapons, only for them to be slain by the dragons and then have their good magical swords, which we forged through great pains and hardships, taken from them just to give them to a dragon, who then used them to fight us? I was like, this makes no sense. I guess
things changed in the Kingdom of Winchester with the rise of King Remington and some innovations that he made to the armament, like the sword very rapidly went out of fashion. So
first there was the crossbow.
I mean, that crossbow's good, but it takes a while to reload, and you need a special fork, and you need to be pretty strong.
But you don't need to be very skilled to use one.
That's right.
As opposed to a longbow or a sword, which takes much more practice.
Which can be used very poorly. And a crossbow is much harder to misuse. And it's sort of like he imposed this philosophy of no touch, no sin, like describing pacifism as simply like if none of the blood spatter reaches you, then you didn't really kill anyone. So ranged weapons became enormously popular under King Remington, much to the detriment of young Accolade, because there are basically no more swords to be had.
Also, like shooting a crossbow at a tower doesn't really work.
No.
And so they kind of fail to account for the fact that the new, walking up to the tower, riding up on your horse and brandishing your sword and challenging the dragon to a duel. And if you're lucky, you didn't get one of the fire-breathing ones or one of the electricity ones, because that was like quite messy in your metal armor.
Wouldn't the metal armor Hey, wouldn't the metal armor be a Faraday cage?
Yes, but you might still get roasted in it. Also, the horse, not very good for the horses either.
So enter Accolade's adversary, and I should say also salvation, because finally someone comes from the kingdom of Winchester, and he is actually brandishing a sword. Comes up the road, does the whole thing. He's got not exactly shining armor, but beggars can't be takers. The arrival of young Colt.
Yeah.
He's a bit of an outcast in his own society as well. He doesn't embrace the new technology, the crossbows, and how ranged weapons are taking over everything. He sort of romantically yearns for the days of swords. And in the style of swords into plowshares, he has taken some of his family's guns and melted them down into a sword. Which is not traditionally how things go, but...
No, but, it's like you could do this.
You need pretty good steel for a rifle barrel.
I think actually a rifle barrel needs to be more ductile than
does it?
hard. Well, you'd think so, because you get lots of pressure, but if it's very hard, then it's more likely to shatter on the sudden pressure.
Because I remember reading once about the Ulfbert swords. Do you know those? They were Viking swords that were supposedly like a millennium ahead of their time in terms of quality. They were very pure, very strong yet flexible steel. So at a time when the rest of Europe was manufacturing like slag-ridden, over-carbonated swords that shattered like glass, these Ulfbert swords, they could last multiple wars and still be good.
Well, actually, over-carbonating wasn't the problem. The problem was actually getting the swords hard enough. And I think I know what you're talking about now with the Viking swords, because they had the tradition that they used animal bones in the fire, which they thought that the animal spirits would then enter the blades and make them better weapons.
Right.
Turns out that just adding the carbon from the bones in there during the forging process allows the steel to take up more of that carbon and get a slightly harder outside.
Yeah, they had huge advantages in smithing anyway, because like up in Scandinavia, it's cold, so trees grow slow
and dense.
Get
good charcoal. Yeah.
Yep, enormous heat output when you light them on fire.
Well, you have to make them into charcoal first, but dense wood is very good for making charcoal. So that's
fantastic. So they have far superior swords. Although I believe that there is some historical, I don't know if it's consensus or hypothesis, that the steel was imported from Iran or places where they had much more advanced metalwork.
It is known that the Vikings had contacts all the way down in Turkey. Look, I think there's the Antonio Banderas movie, The Seventh Warrior, or something like that.
Oh, The 13th Warrior.
13th Warrior, that's
yes, that's right.
But there are actually Viking runic inscriptions in the great mosque of wherever in Istanbul, which is something like Hargar was here, which is pretty much what it amounts to. And they made it all the way over there.
Yeah, so Accolade is delighted and shaken from his...
He perks up. He's like leaning on his elbows on the battlements, like wistfully glancing out over the plains when he sees this little shiny speck in the distance, which is slowly approaching on his horse, which is a young colt.
Now, of course, he's not everything that Accolade dreamt of. He's not a great knight in armor. He's just wearing, you see it on the cover, he's wearing his tactical tunic.
Yes.
And, he's not the best knight, but he is the best knight that is still looking to prove himself.
Yes. And Accolade just he excitedly runs around, getting his stuff in order, testing his breath weapon, accidentally toasting a chandelier. And
it's kind of a meet cute, because Colt is doing the same thing meanwhile. He's just so excited to meet his first dragon, and I hope he doesn't think I'm lame. It's like a little first date.
It is. Accolade runs out and not kind of runs out, he has to wait for the official challenge, but he's kind of excitedly
he can't wait. And okay, what kind of dragon I'm going to be? I'm going to be one of those old sage dragons. I'm going to be the mysterious voice in the darkness, or I'm going to be a fierce animal. Oh, I don't know which one he'll like better. It's so cute.
And, Colt makes his traditional challenge of, I beseech you to, come and fight me or die, you stupid lizard, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's the one. Those traditional words.
Yes.
Die, you stupid fucking lizard.
Come out here, you coward, and fight me like a lizard?
Yeah, I was not impressed by his speech.
No,
I've got to say.
He was a little bit
Christopher Rowley, great writer, I'm sure.
A little bit bumbly. I think he did that intentionally.
Oh, yeah?
It's make young Colt look a little bit insecure and stumbling over his words.
I mean, both of them are. So the battle starts, and Accolade tries his fire breath. He has not had a lot of practice.
No.
His aim's terrible.
It's very showy, and Colt, he shies back from the sudden heat, but it missed him, and it's singed the tail on his horse a little bit.
His tactical tunic does does help a lot more than if he was wearing full armor. Simply exposure to that kind of heat would continue to cook him.
Yes, that's the big problem with metal armor. It's like once you get it like roasted, then you get like cooked in your armor. And like tactical tunics, I mean, it strategically burns away, I suppose, or
it's ablative. Yeah.
Well, he does have his asbestos underwear, which helps him against.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't live long back in the Middle Ages, so I guess
as long as you don't cut it, it's fine.
Yeah, gifted to him by his sister, Sour Sig. She's a bit of a
prune face, but other than that, a long battle ensures between the two, and I guess neither of them can really get the leg over with the other one.
No, that sword is utterly ineffective against Accolade's hide. Accolade is also particularly unimpressed by the sword. Colt is a child of Winchester, so he does have his backup gun occasionally.
Oh, yes. And once that tunic gets burnt away, and especially the breeches, then there's a little bit of
Accolade gets to do a short arms inspection.
Although not that short, if we have to believe the storyline.
Yeah. He gets a front row ticket to the gun show because that is where Winchester has
packing quite a punch there.
Developed. Yeah, like it's all guns. Yeah. It's all guns for everything. I was sort of reminded, Asterix and Obelix, the Belgian comic series.
No, French, actually.
French?
Yeah.
There we go. What was his name? Goscinny?
And Dupuis.
Or Goscinny?
Goscinny and...
See, I always thought it was like Goscinny and that it was French, but he's Polish.
Oh, okay.
Or of Polish familial descent.
Oh, it's like there was two of them.
No, it wasn't Goscinny. It was Uderzo.
Yeah, Goscinny and Uderzo. Both of them, yeah. Okay. It was a duo. One was the writer, and the other one was the artist. So I don't think I've heard of any new albums being released.
Well, I know that that's the case with one of the Netherlands' proudest literary and comics figures, Sir Ollie B. Bommel and Tom Poes, which had been revived with art by a friend of mine, Henrike Goorhuis.
Yes, she was like be able to draw that style perfectly, the same as Toon Hermans. No, not Toon Hermans, Maarten Toonder.
Maarten Toonder is the one. She's fantastic. I actually got to attend a talk where she was in attendance as well about Maarten Toonder, so the creator of these characters in the Second World War, and how he was involved in the creation of an animated movie that was not produced, but existed to provide jobs and therefore cover for several Jewish artists.
Oh, okay. So they were just, the only purpose was like to have, they're working.
To keep them employed.
Yeah, so they have employment.
On this animated film that was never going to be finished. And where they got the financing, I don't recall, but
that's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool.
I think he moved to Ireland. He spent the rest of his life living in Ireland, I believe.
Oh, good for him.
Maarten Toonder, yeah.
So the reason I thought about Asterix and Obelix was there was one... Okay, so while a literary classic, these comics are super racist.
Yes.
In their depiction of other cultures. And one of them was go to Corsica, the Italian island.
Oh, where everybody's like got switchblades and everything.
It's switchblade everything. Switchblade swords, switchblade combs, switchblade daggers. It's all of the, and so that's kind of what I got from the Kingdom of Winchester. Everything's guns. Like when the battle dies down between Accolade and Colt, Colt is starving and so is Accolade, and they're sort of leaning against each other. So Colt gets out his breakfast gun and fires off some breakfast. Freshly cooked for both of them to enjoy.
Bagels and...
yeah, but with a little squirt from his wine gun as well.
Ooh, yeah.
Nothing helps young people bond like food.
That's one of the things.
Right, after hardship, I mean, the trials and the hardship, they're fun, but then afterward you share a meal together and now you're friends.
And even better, after the fight and their nourishment and their recovery, they kind of look at each other and go like, do we really have to keep fighting? And they go like, It's like,
I mean, what do we want out of this, right?
Can't we just like team up? It's more like a thing that starts to grow. They kind of decide to wander off and leave the Tower of Terror behind and go off and do their thing.
Yeah, because we're both misfits. Like, we're not doing this for the respect of our peers. They're not going to give it.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Like, and he goes, that sword of yours is rubbish anyways. I mean, that's a bit of a bone.
I know.
It's a bit of a boner of contention there. But Accolade works out that although the law says that he has to win his sword by conquest, it's never said it's going to be military conquest.
Right.
And a little bit of romantic conquest turns into the situation here.
Yeah, because he sees young Colt, and that's one of the first humans that he's seen.
He's seen the heads of the humans plenty enough. They're like decorating the halls of Bethesda.
And he starts to realize that his yearning for this conflict was not so much for the fighting, but just like maybe there was something else that he wanted from a knight in shining armor.
They both got a lot from each other.
They certainly did, but I also appreciated that, aside from the fun they had around the fireside, now obviously some sizing differences, but that can only add to the fun sometimes.
Some people are into that.
Hell yeah. That they really got to know each other and explored, like, what are you into? Like, what are you here to do? What do you want? And Accolade did realize that the sword was kind of important to him. He did want it to be one of those cool, like, sword-wielding dragons.
He had to be, because he has to come back and, like, join the good fight.
And Colt decides, you know what? Let's do this together.
Yeah. So they get on the road and, like, journey back to the great halls of Mythogger, where Queen Bethesda is waiting.
What does that mean, by the way?
I think it's a great serpent in Norse mythology. So
is that the one?
That's the one. Accolade shows up with young Colt, and the first one that they encounter is his brother Bandai, who's mocks them a little bit. Who's this who you have there? I see you brought a human. You're a human knight. Is that the famous Surrender?
Yeah. And Colt doesn't get it initially, and he thinks, oh, great, they've knighted me already.
Yes.
I'm a sir. Yes, that's me. I'm a sir now. I'm a knight. I'm a real knight. I'm Sir Render. And Accolade just rolls his eyes and like, oh my God.
Like, no, please
can you not do this in front of my family, please?
Tail pokes him, like, shut up.
But Colt is not dissuaded. He is proud to stand in the halls of Nithogger, Sir Render of Winchester, and he withstands the sniggering. Now, of course, the big quest is to secure a sword, because it's all well and good to have found his knight in shining armor, even though it's like a green tunic, but it is pretty fireproof.
Yes. I guess the shining was done by the fine knob that was polished on the end of the sword.
Lord. And so it's back across the border, and this time it's off into the Kingdom of Winchester, because they go back and forth a few times. You know how they're like. They like to sort of reciprocate.
Yes, can't have one without the other. It's like,
yeah, exactly. With the help of his sister Sour Sig and Kimber, they're introduced to the chief engineer, the chief scientist under King Remington, who's responsible for creating all of these magnificent devices that have changed the Kingdom of Winchester. A gentleman named Walter, a PhD gentleman named Walter PhD, a professor who examines sort of the situation that they're in. Like, okay, so you need a sword that's fit for a dragon. Now, that's going to be tricky. I don't know much about swords, but you know who knows a lot about swords? We know several myths about some of the best and most magical swords and where to get them. And like, one of them is the Lad of the Lake, who is...
Yes. Famous for distributing swords.
Yes, yeah. And there are certain sort of political sensitivities.
Some people even try to form governmental structures around this concept, but
it's not a huge success. Neither is the next myth that they explore, just the stone in the sword. Now, they see it immediately and they go, this is not going to be it. That's a sword with a rock in it.
Well, traditionally, the pommel of a sword is like inlaid with gems and stuff, so that
yes,
would be
but not the blade. Well, not the blade with like half a menhir sticking out of the side.
It's a very heavy blade. It's
the worst kind of hammer.
It's more like a club than a sword, really. But yes, that's not. It doesn't really work. That the stone in the sword.
After their disappointment with the stone and the sword, they do encounter another mythical creature, a two-horned, a bull-headed gentleman. They both can go, all right.
Yeah, we've seen this before.
The Minotaurus,
yes,
who tells them the legend of Snickersnack, the Vorpal sword, and then they go, okay, that sounds
Vorpal
good.
Swords. I mean, you have to be careful with Vorpal swords.
Why is that?
Because they're really mouthy bastards.
Is that what they are?
Well.
See, I only know it from Jabberwocky.
Oh.
Where it's just described as the Vorpal sword that goes Snickersnack, but I understand that it has a pedigree in D&D.
Jabberwocky is older than D&D. Vorpal swords are
That's what I mean.
Notoriously sharp and like renowned for taking off your head in a single strike. I mean, like my personal favorite is the Mace of Sharpness, but that's...
I wonder how that works.
Poorly.
So off they go on their quest and to find Snickersnack, where they grow closer, as one should
very
expect.
much so. It's like, especially in the cold of the night, and I guess he's not very cold-blooded because he's usually the one who's keeping young Colt warm, being wrapped around him. So I guess we are dealing with a warm-blooded dragon. He's certainly a warm-hearted dragon.
Oh, that's really nice. That's a really nice way to describe him. I was a big fan of Accolade, and I regret that his family was so dismissive of him, but I'm so glad that he found someone to share this quest with him, because that's what he needed, so that by the time that they encounter the Vorpal sword and the snake curse, both of them are quite adept at snake charming by this point.
So they've both had plenty effective practice at doing this.
Yeah.
And,
overcoming the snake curse and claiming Snickersnack for themselves, which they wield together, and then we see them on the cover, armored, as they're returning to their corrupted homeland.
Is the curved blade on the front cover then?
That's what I think.
Basically, Accolade has to go back and present himself in the Great Halls of Nithogor. On the way back, they meet his other brothers, Gorilla and Dynamix, who are easily conquered with the help of the new sword and, of course, the other technology from the Kingdom of Winchester.
They're not prepared for all of these cool
Those two
guns.
are suddenly they see their little brother Accolade and they're going to go we're just going to kick his ass and we're going to steal his sword and make sure make sure that Queen Bethesda never gets to see him and kick him out. But it turns out that with the help of the sword and the technology from Winchester, those two dragons don't stand a chance.
And I like that. I don't know if that was your reading, but for me it was the sword and it was the weapons. But more than anything, it was the bond between Accolade and Colt.
Yes. And
they work together so well.
And that's how they present themselves in the Great Halls, and Queen Bethesda goes huh.
So how did you do this? She is a wise ruler. And
she's clearly not
curious.
Happy, but she's more okay, I'll buy it. It's fine. It follows the rules. It's technically it meets the rules. I'll allow it. I mean, she sees that they're both happy, and she doesn't feel too resentful. I mean, she always thought that Accolade was. I mean, he was the runt. He's the youngest of the batch, and But it goes okay, I guess I can see this working, especially with the way that Gorilla and Dynamix have been defeated. She goes, okay, this is a good thing. We can make this work.
You've completed your conquest of a knight in shining armor. You've even defeated some of your own kind.
You've got a sword more than once.
Yeah. You got stabbed a whole bunch of times and didn't die. That's incredible.
I think he's trying to skirt the edges of the censors, I believe. It's but I think he gets away with it.
Now, and after leaving with Queen Bethesda's blessing as a full knight, it's Colt's turn because he has to be knighted as well. In the traditions of Winchester, where everyone is lost, you have such a sword-based society that is now bereft of swords, and everything has to be done by militant pacifism with guns. And he's so uncertain what to do until Accolade notices the last gun that he's in his traveling pack that he hasn't used, his shaving gun.
Yeah.
And between them, the two of them realizes we have just invented the bayonet, bridging the gap between the sword and gun, and bringing these two empires together, and they can finally resume their symbiotic relationship. And in appreciation of his great feat, Colt is renamed from Surrender to Surprised because he's so valued.
They were considering Serenity, but it's Surprised is definitely better because he has brought
and certainly by
peace
Accolade
between the kingdoms.
Yeah, no one prizes him more than Accolade. Oh man, I love this book.
Yes. I think it's a very shining example of young adult fantasy.
Yes, of which we don't see enough. And it's so wholesome, and it's so sweet.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of gruesome...
And it's salty.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, but gruesome bloodshed is not a problem for children's fiction.
No, I suppose not.
The old pre-Hans Christian Andersen, pre-Grimm Brothers, fairy tales of...
the brutal ones, yes.
Red Riding Hood.
The evil...
Whoa!
Yeah, it's eating... quote unquote. The evil stepmother being forced to dance in red hot shoes at Cinderella's wedding, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's some really nasty shit going on there.
Now, I myself, I'm a proud uncle, and I'm very much looking forward to embellishing these stories for my beloved nibblings.
Make going to the Efteling a bit more of a nightmarish terror episode than...
Yes, because you've heard all the nice stuff. Let me tell you about, this one, and the guts came out, and she was like, and she was and screaming, and the skin came off.
And then you hand them back to their parents. All right, so, great book.
Yeah, I really loved it. And I'm a huge fan of Colt and Accolade. And I honestly do hope that we see more of them in the future. Maybe we'll find...
Let's see if Mr. Rowley wrote a sequel.
Yeah, or some other author. Do you know how we've noticed that a lot of people sort of write sequels to each other's books these days?
Yes.
That's come up in the...
funny that. Maybe there's pen names that we're not aware with.
That's right. How are we going to rate this book?
Oh, well...
I mean, it was certainly nice.
Very nice. Let's see. I mean, we can rate it swords, but
it is episode 69. Should we do something with that? We've never done that before, have we?
Have we? Well, no, we have rated out of 69.
I know, we totally have.
We totally have. So let's... let's see. Guns? I mean, I can do guns. We have 6 shooters. 5 out of 6 shooter.
5 out of 6 shooter.
We can do... I mean, there's more than 6 shots fired in this book, but...
there certainly is.
Let's see what else we got. I mean, we can go calibers. There's definitely a caliber difference between Accolade and Colt, but
yeah, the barrels are compatible in some.
well, Accolade is more like a 40mm grenade launcher, and like
yeah.
Colt. I mean, like
Only 40 mil, by the way, which Bandai never ceases to tease him over.
yeah. Well, it's like he's a young dragon.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Maybe swords. Well, there again, I mean, Accolade has a
saber out of rapier.
I mean, neither of them are particularly rapier. Although Accolade does have the Zweihander.
Yes, I know the Zweihander. I mean, it's like definitely a two-hand job for Colt. No, let's go with 8, like 7 out of 8. Like 8.
7 out of 8.
You have 8-shot revolvers. Like,
oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll
7 out of... Oh, that sounds wonderful. So speaking of reviews, if you look down at your podcasting device, you should be seeing some opportunity to maybe leave a review in your podcasting software of choice. And otherwise, you can also get in touch with us. We're at CoverMyAssCast on Twitter, and we're CoverMyAssCast@gmail.com on the emails. We'd love to hear from you what you thought. And hey, if you want to do us a little favor and help out the podcast, you can leave us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe leave a review for an episode you haven't listened to, because that's kind of our brand.
Yeah, stay in tune with the spirit of the podcast, and like review an episode that you haven't listened to, and let us know what you thought of it, and let us know what you thought it was about.
Yeah, we're very curious about that. So what do we have in store for our readers next time?
Next week's book is by Amy Bender, The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake.
And about covers it. Thank you for joining us at Cover My Ass, where baffling books are reviewed but not read by yours truly. My name is Kaki.
And I'm Kay, and remember,
we only judge a book by its cover. I'm really uncertain about this one. Well, the sadness of lemon cakes. Lemon cakes are great.
I know.
Like, I love some lemon cakes.
Lemon cakes are fantastic. Lemon bars are very good too.
What's a lemon bar?
Kind of like a crumbly base cake, like a key lime pie.
Oh, yeah. In the words of Surprise, just shove that in my mouth now, please.
Yes.